Hello, everybody, and welcome. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer. It might be an hour later, but it's still Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, the original Blood Crusher. It's Tom. How you doing, Tom?
Hello, friends.
Also joining us this week, it's not Mc1Gamer. Whoa, what's going on? Hey, you're not Mc1Gamer. How you doing there, MC1?
How are you? Glad to come in as a relief pitcher.
Yes, exactly. We had to call him up from the bench. Our first pitcher pulled a hammy somewhere or something. Yes. Mc1Gamer wasn't feeling well tonight, and we hope he feels better very soon. So certainly feel better, bud. We're all hoping for you, and don't worry, we will do the fluff show with Mc1Gamer sometime in the future. But as that show was reserved for him, we're going to change up our topic tonight. So instead of deep diving on the fluff, which we will still do, like I said, sometime in the future, instead tonight we're going to talk about Mordheim. That's right. It's going to be the all Mordheim weekly episode. Well, not really, because we're still going to talk about Warhammer news and stuff. But then to Mordheim. But anyways, first let's kick it off with the standard items. Let's talk about some news and rumors and other associated exciting things. So Tom, what do we got this week, buddy?
So the Celestant Prime, we have images.
Yeah. You want me to share those up? Everybody ready?
Please do. We can have our discussion about the Celestant.
Sounds good. Oh.
Do I seem excited?
You seem very excited, very motivated to talk
Here
about
we go. You see that okay?
Yep.
There he is.
I was a bit blinded by his aura.
Really? I was kind of blinded by the tornado of space trash that he's picked up in his wake.
That's
like
that's just the celestial hurricanums that survived the old world.
No, they didn't survive. It's the remnants of them that got consumed in the destruction of the old world. Like, I didn't realize that space had that much junk floating around in it.
Well, I just assume he's always on a tornado. Like, he rides around on a tornado, and he just sort of accidentally went over their celestial hurricanum and broke it up into tiny pieces as his typhoon just ripped it apart, and now he's just got the bits of it left floating in his wake.
For me, that's the most disappointing part. Like, I love that Galmaraz is on there. I love everything else that's going on there. But man, that tornado.
There we go. There's a shot from above so we can see all of the space refuse floating in him there.
Now, have you taken a look at his stats though? His war scroll.
Yes, I have.
What do you think?
Oh, and there he is next to the Glocken. So yeah, there you go. Like, how big is he? He's as tall as the Glocken.
He's a normal dude with a big wingspan.
Yeah, he's pretty tall. Like, yes, he himself is the size of a normal Liberator / Sigmarite. But yes, between his wings and his refuse tornado, he gets as tall as the Glocken.
You could easily convert this guy, and if you don't want to get the original model, it's not hard to convert him. You could get some of the pieces from the Hurricanum and one of the prosecutors. Not a hard conversion.
Well, yes, I think you're exactly right. You know, Andy and Rem mentioned the same thing on their show that you could convert this guy. And
they were talking about Nagash's tendrils, though.
Yeah, using like spirits or something. I mean, but I think. One of them, I think Remington mentioned that, like, doesn't he have Celestial Hurricanum bits under him, so couldn't you just use that? Which is funny, because I do have an extra Celestial Hurricanum spinny galaxy thing. But, you know, I'll say two things to that. One, so let's stick to the actual model for a second before I jump into that.
Sure.
First, he's got the bigger wings. I think his wings are fine. If you like the tech wings, these are the biggest, most tech wings, right, if you like the look. My real problem with him, and I think we have to... There he is from the back, by the way, which I do love his cloak. That's pretty awesome. And then
I'd love to buy bits from him.
Sure, there's the zoom in on his bit tornado, his refuse tornado. I love, by the way, that GW couldn't resist putting some skulls on the base of this, because I'm pretty sure that these skulls are not... Like, this skull and this skull, those don't come with him. That's just GW scatter skulls and everything.
Those are the guys who got too close to the eye of the storm.
Right. My problem with this guy is, does he look fat to you?
You saying because he has to fly around, he's putting on a little bit of weight?
This guy looks like the Baron Harkonnen.
I was just gonna say.
Yes, bring in the Celestant Prime, the floating fat man. Yeah, like I feel like maybe he needs to hit the gym a little more. He's not really. He's bulked out there in the middle. I understand not really. It's the chunkiness of the armor and all the extra junk they put around his torso. But he just looks like he had a few too many beers at the Sigmarheim beer hall. So, yeah, I don't know. That's one of my problems. Now, to get back to the conversion thing, yeah, the miss with this is, so this guy is $80 US.
No way.
Yes.
Oh.
So here's the actual pricing sheet. So
Yep.
he's all of these numbers for all these different things that I don't know where they are. I know that if you're in New Zealand, I'm sorry. That's what I know for sure. So that's unfortunate. But here's the US number, $80.
Yeah.
So
Build it for 15.
Well, none
Yeah.
of that. Like, you can go still back Raging Heroes through PayPal right now, and you can get, if you're willing to wait it like probably a year, you can get a fantastic like sub for it for $27. Then it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful mini.
if you're willing to wait a year. I love how that's an option. No, I'm not willing to wait a year for any model that I want to have right now. That is not. I'm barely willing to wait a week if I want the model right now.
Some of us are more patient than others, Vince.
That's probably true.
To talk about it from the other side, people who like the look of the Stormcast Eternals probably will mostly eat this up. I mean, it definitely takes everything that is about the Stormcast Eternals and kind of ramps it up to 11.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he's a very necessary model for the army because, honestly, the guy on his kitty dragon, the cat dragon, he really wasn't big enough to be a centerpiece model for the army, right? And one of my problems with the Stormcast still is that they don't really have any monsters. They have nothing that is, like, I understand they don't need them. They're perfectly destructive enough, so not from a tactical perspective is how I'm talking about this right now. I just mean from a modeling army look perspective. There's nothing big standing out that's catching your eye. So they needed this. It still is a normal dude, but certainly he's, head and shoulders or perhaps refuse tornado and wings above his fellow Sigmarines.
Couldn't they just have like a gigantic Space Marine like a giant? Literally a giant Space Marine.
Yeah, just take the guy from the front lawn of Games Workshop in Nottingham and actually just package him as a fig, like a Warlord Titan-sized Sigmarite.
Sure, why not? These guys are kind of heroes imbued into the armor anyway. Just
Right,
bigger armor.
Sure,
Yeah,
exactly.
There's really nothing stopping Sigmar from like pumping those guys out.
One would think, yeah. Where are the bigger ones, Games Workshop? Come on, let's go. Let's see some big giant versions of these guys. I agree.
He reminds me of Nagash in a lot of ways. There's a lot the profile of the model looks big, but there's a lot of thin stuff holding him up. I just don't. I'm not happy with the price tag. But I'm not playing the Eternals, so.
Hey, he's $20-$30 cheaper than Nagash.
Sure. For me, it's not really the price tag. It doesn't bother me. He's a big centerpiece model. Big centerpiece models are expensive. That's fine. Whatever. If he was at the $100 or something that was Nagash, I'd feel a little more injured about it. I honestly don't think I'm going to pick him up just because there's enough little things I would want to change that I feel like I'm just going to convert him. And in fact, I already picked up I've already placed orders for stuff that I'm going to use to replace him.
Which feathered wings are you going to use? Are you going to use the Karl Franz Griffin wings, or maybe what kind of wings are you going to convert? Because you have all feathered wings for your guys.
I do have all feathered wings for my people. Yes. So that is still TBD. I'll say that. I don't know yet. Some, but I don't know what kind yet.
Yeah.
I'm still pulling for the Swift Rock feather wings. The Swift Feather, like the Skyrunner Chariot.
The Skycutter Chariot thing. They just look like normal wings to me. And if I was going to steal something elvish, I'd go buy a Flamespire Phoenix or something and use his wings.
Not too expensive either to get those bits.
Well, there's none out there right now. The actual I can get the frost bits, but I can't get the fire bits. Anywho,
which there's an irony to that, by the way, because they used to be like dirt cheap.
Right, sure.
The fire
got better. Now he's ridiculous, and all of a sudden those bits dried up as everybody feverishly rips the frosty part off the bottom of their model's wings.
See, if I did it, I would use the Morghast skeletal wings.
Oh, nice. Oh, sure. Because everything becomes undead in your world, Mitch.
Everything.
Yes.
Has to be.
Promising.
It has to be deadish.
Sure. All right. So that's the Celestant Prime. Yes, I did look at his rules. I'm sorry, I don't have that screenshot. But yeah, I mean, as he stands, he's not impressive attack-wise. Like he starts out with 2 attacks that are 3 up, neg 3 rend, and 3 damage. So kudos on the rule of 3s there. He certainly hits like a truck with Galmaraz. I think his real ability is the comet call down he has, where he can pick a point within 24 inches, roll a dice, and everybody within inches of that point suffers D3 mortal wounds. I think that's quite a powerful character assassination tool.
Not to harp on this, but I mean his attacks do increase if you keep him out of combat for each round, like by 2.
Yep.
Now I don't want to continue to harp on this, but much like the Green Knight, if you follow the summoning rules where all war scrolls are in play, this guy now is also waiting on the wings for every army if you want to bring him in. So if at any point you decide that you might lose, you can just lay him on the table if you're playing by that rule set, and immediately have a super multi-attacking, auto-comet calling monstrosity on the table.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of those big loopholes. I will say, just on a little bit of a tangent, he's Thor. He's totally Thor.
Sure.
And the just the whole thing with if you want to go hog wild with converting a Stormcast Eternal army that just looks like a bunch of Asgardians, I think that would work really well because you could just make him Thor.
Absolutely, he'd be a great
You just gave me an idea for an army.
No, you can't steal that. If I can't steal the Bretonnians from Vince, you can't steal my Asgardian Stormcast Eternals.
No. I'm gonna make the Avengers.
Unless, even better. Unless, of course, you give me, trademark credit. and then you can take it. Anybody can.
No, I'm just gonna go with the Avengers. Like the roster lineup is big enough for the Avengers. I mean, like the true Avengers. That really, man, you could go on forever.
All right, so Celestant Prime, he's real big, and there you go. What else have we got coming up? What other news and rumors do we have?
So we had some news pop up this last week of that the paint range was changing, and one of those rules or one of those rumors that is still yet to materialize that came down from a store is that there's a number of paints that are going to get pulled, and amongst them a number of the layer paints like Lamentor's Yellow, or some of the even glaze paints like Lamentor's Yellow, and some of the low selling paints, the infrequent, and I a lot of people were real skeptical of this because it was only part of the line and we just weren't sure what was going to happen. And then GW got leaked that they have an entire airline that's being released. You got an image for that, Vince?
I do, as a matter of fact, yeah. So yes, we have the GW airline coming out. So it's all Games Workshop air paints. So that would be these right there. There you go. Citadel Air, 51 paints, and then the thinner and the cleaner.
Okay, GW, can you meet me at camera 2?
Yeah, exactly.
So I just have to ask, GW, no dropper bottle?
Right. Why is this in pots?
Have you ever used an airbrush?
Right.
I haven't used an airbrush yet, and I know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that you can't pipette things out of here. I get it. That's fine. We're not saying it's impossible. But as somebody who airbrushes a lot, it's annoying. Like, I have pipettes for this purpose when I need to pull something out of whatever, out of a bottle that's not a dropper bottle. And it's annoying. It's unbelievably annoying. And it's certainly something that would make me want to not use your paint range. Like, if this had come out in dropper bottles, I'd give it a shot. I'm always looking for more airbrush paints.
It's another one of those wasteful things that I think is designed so that There's plenty left over before it's unusable, so you have to buy another one.
I'd like to think they're not being that crass about it.
Really?
I mean, sure. I mean, I'd like to think they operate with, not evil intentions. Yeah, I think it's more like this, Mitch. And I think there is money behind it. And I think the money is this. We have 8 million of these bottles produced. I mean, can you imagine how many of this little dropper, or not dropper, I'm sorry, this little paint pot bottle? Because all the bottles obviously start the same, right? It's all the same bottle. Can you imagine? There must be a warehouse somewhere in England that's like that warehouse from the end of Raiders. Instead of being full of just like old weird artifacts, it's just full of boxes of these empty pots that they then just ship out to become this paint. Yeah. Right? And they were like, man, we're not making a second bottle. Forget it. They're going in these.
That makes sense.
And their paint cases and everything else will utilize that bottle thing. Like, we get it from a business standpoint. It's still pretty crappy.
So now the rumor for the new paints. Are we talking about a few new paints, a few retired paints, or are we talking about a complete name change on all the paints with a re-release? Because if we have to go through another conversion chart,
yeah, it seemed like it looked like a list of about 15 or 20 paints. Damn. So it's not the entire 150 paint line. Like, it was a very strategic weeding out of their line, which would also explain, by the way, why they discontinued the big box, the Ultimate Paint set, this last spring. If they are truly making changes to their line.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense. It follows that they would want to skinny that down after some point in time. I mean, I personally love Lamenter's Yellow, but even I use it very rarely. So what that says to me is, go to the store, pick up another 1 or 2 pots. I've got it for the next 20 years, at the rate I use that at. And that's why they're pulling it, because even somebody who likes it, like me, is going to buy one every decade. That's not a profitable investment.
Sure.
So I get it. That's fine. Whatever. There's plenty of yellows out there and stuff like that. You can, and in the end, it's not that hard to make your own glaze like that if you needed to. So what else have we got, Tom? What else is on the rumor mill?
I'm blanking. We had obviously the Fortress is hitting this weekend.
Yes.
And good night, man. I knew the Fortress was coming, but let me just say this: I didn't see the full court press of the 8 different sets and the I didn't see them leaning into it like that.
What's the full Fortress set? $1,100.
$1,120. And there was a really interesting thing. I checked the War Store. Because I was wondering to see if I could piece together the big set just at the 20% discount of the War Store, and I noticed that at least at the War Store they didn't have the wall sections, and the wall packs themselves are web only. But it looks like even the individual wall sections, I don't know if stores are going to be able to get those or not. So it'll be, I mean, normally they could if they're not web only, but it'll be interesting to see how GW markets this.
Well, I've heard a lot of criticism about it. Obviously, if you're not a Chaos player, or unless of course you're a store or you're a group of people that want to throw in, you might not necessarily be that interested. But it might be worth it, as a piece of terrain to get maybe some of the smaller portions of it. You don't have to get the entire fortress unless you're born with a platinum spoon in your mouth or something. It's certainly very interesting. I'd like to see what the other version of Fortress is going to be. The Stormcast, yeah, the good guy one.
Do you remember Metroplex, the Transformer City? You remember him, that toy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so it's just that. It's just Metroplex. It's just that, but it's floating around a star. That's all it is. Yeah, I mean, I think the individual tower is some of the towers are probably your best buys because those could just go on your table pretty easily and look like a reasonable piece of dark, dangerous terrain. They have a contest to guess the number of skulls, which I thought was pretty funny. You can win stuff if you guess the number of skulls.
For the entire fully built fortress that they have a picture of?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be 5 digits.
It's a lot of skulls. It's all skulls. I think that Once Bitten should take up this challenge. He's been working on that fortress he's been working on for years, where he paints each brick like red, yellow, green, blue, red. He paints each brick of the old fortress from way back in like 5th or 6th edition, and then he washes it and dry brushes it and washes it down to create this slight tonal variation in the bricks. You know, and he does like one wall section a year. I think he should get this fortress now and paint the skulls individually, and pick up with that for the next decade of his project. Calling you out, OB. There you go.
I don't know. What I would say is that I think it was smart the way they marketed this castle, because I could see 40K players picking it up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is, you know, like, this is something that easily would have if you wanted to chaosify, you know, if that's a word, a planet. Like, this would be one way to do it, and it would fit in. And I mean, what I would say is that, like, I think, you know, Vince, you said the towers would be a good grab. I agree. The other one that I think would be a good grab is just the wall sections and a gate.
Sure.
Because it's amazing, like, what you could do with like, you know, 4 or 5 wall sections and a gate. Like, you could make like a true like mile gate. You could section off a corner of your board with a tower behind it. I mean, there's just a lot of things that you could do with just a handful of pieces. And the way they designed them, because they can be both like circular and because they can be both straight based on how you orient them, I think that there's a lot of promise in their design. So kudos to them for actually putting that together.
You know what's really appealing about the fortress is that they're sticking with the scenery War Scrolls rules to make them also unique and have a very special. It's not just a piece of terrain. They've got a whole series of rules, each particular section.
Yep, absolutely.
And they're pretty interesting. You could have, if you could just, like you said, just buy a couple of sections. You could make there's an interesting battle that you could play just with those rules for the scenery.
Agreed, and I think it's a cool thing, and I think it's probably an underexplored thing. I haven't seen it talked about in a lot of the AOS battle reports of people using a lot of the actual terrain war scrolls. I'd love to see some more of that, you know, actually get explored and such.
I have one that I'm still cutting, and it's Nagash.
Nice.
Nagash falls into an ambush with the Skaven around some realm gates. So yeah, that's all I'll say. But
all
yeah,
right, well, we look forward to it.
There's some guys that do it. There's some guys that do a really good job with was it tabletop minis? These guys are out of France. They do a nice job with the terrain. Gorilla does a nice job with terrain. There's a few guys that have really gone the extra mile to make sure that they roll it up or they use a specific piece with some of the scenarios in the books. So
yeah, I've seen a lot of people do the roll up, which I like. That's fine. Just like more use of those things. But I'm sure it's out there. I haven't seen all of it. But if you know one, people watching, and you have one you want to share, hey, put it down below. I'd love to watch it. I want to see some people use more of like the numinescence oculumi or whatever, and the other things, the Dragon Fade Dais and that kind of stuff. Doom had a nice one where he used the Realm Gate and tried to sneak behind his enemy's army, which I thought was fun. All right, and then, you know, sadly, I think the other rumor that we saw was that this wonderful age of constant releases for AOS is going to be drawing to a close sometime soon. The good times could not last forever, as the rumor mill is circulating that it's maybe a month or so away from returning to some 40K releases.
That's good. I could actually make a little bit of money before I have to spend it.
Supposedly returning with some Tau, and then of course the long-awaited Horus Heresy game. I think it's called, like, it's been rumored to be called Battle for Ultramar. So there you go. The old 30K box set game that has been rumored for ever, longer than ever, before time itself will finally maybe be out this year, maybe.
Could be next year still.
Could be. You never know. And but I'm hoping we return back to AOS before the end of the year, and certainly I think we've still got more terrain coming and other things like that.
Yeah, and they have another. They also have another book. They said campaign book before, and some more Sigmar Corn stuff to roll out before the end of this release cycle.
Damn, I want my fiery dwarves on lizards before the end of the year.
Yeah, I doubt you're going to get it, but they are coming. I think 2016 is when you're going to see, like, the fiery dwarf lizards. I think you're going to see whatever's going on with the elves. I think you're going to see new type of lizardmen, Seraphon releases. I think you're going to see all that stuff. So, and I for one look forward to that. I want to see what the elves have become. I'm excited. I want to see some new, cool, crazy, weird elves.
Eldar.
They don't need to be Eldar, but you know, hey, whatever. That's fine. I would love them to be inspired by the old casts of the Eldar. Not like I'm not saying I want them to look like Howling Banshees and that kind of stuff, but I'd love it if they had similar breakdowns because those were always awesome. And I've mentioned that like 18 times on this show. So do that. Do that thing, people. Make that happen. I think that'd be fantastic. I mean, look how cool the Harlequins were. They were pretty awesome looking.
That's true.
Just get some flavor like that going on. But, and then also there was the small rumor that one of the next AOS releases here before all the 40K starts is that we'll finally get the prosecutors, the flying guys. We'll get their actual kit, finally. So let's place some bets. Do the prosecutors come 3 to a box or 5? Because the liberators were 3 in the starter, but then ended up coming 5 in the box. So do the flying angels come 3 to a box or 5?
It'll be 5 and it'll be at $60.
All right.
2.
2? How much is the box?
2. $25.
Okay. You're way more hopeful than I am.
Okay, 35.
All right. There you go.
I forgot my discounts. All right.
All right. I think that these will stay 3, and they're going to be 50 even. There you go. That's my guess. Yep. This is all conjecture.
There's no way.
I'm telling you. This is my feeling. Folks, do not take this as dictum. This is just random conjecture from us. But, you know, well, the prosecutors are probably real. What they'll be priced at and how many we'll get, who knows. So there you go. All right. Let's turn away from the news and let's get into a quick hobby time. As I noticed, Tom, you can't even stop working for the length of the show.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mitch, what have you been working on lately, buddy?
I have a lot of the models that I have that were sitting in boxes or in bits piles. I've started to change over and put onto rounds, and I needed a Vargulf, which are now a unit, to fit my Bretonnian-themed undead army. So I have 2 of a planned.
Oh yeah.
These are Griffins.
Nice.
From the Elector count, and I've just put some Vargeist wings on them, and they're really about the same size. And I've got the third one, which is the leader of the group, which is King Louis Griffin with bat wings. That one I was actually working on just before the show, so I didn't bring him out.
Blasphemy.
Yeah.
Heresy.
And I'm gonna have to. I mean, I'm gonna have to paint them before they show up on a video, though.
So we'll see them in a video in about 2 years, then.
Sometime in the next 24 months, yes. But no, I've been getting a lot of flack about fielding stuff, doing too much converting and not enough painting. So yeah, I'm gonna have to start putting some stuff together. Whatever I've got in the hopper in terms of battle reports is gonna stay. But I've decided that I'm going to paint and complete units and start fielding those, and just try to limit my my armies to or units to just the stuff that's painted. So, you know, I've gotten the request. So
it's a good motivation. It really is. Yeah. You know, it's the same as the old painting for a tournament, right? Nothing gets your units painted faster than when you're painting for a tournament. So yeah, that's fine. I don't mind gray models. I understand that life is life, and you know we all do this as a hobby. But that being said, I am excited to see some of your stuff painted, Mitch. Not because I need to see painted models, but because you have a lot of great converted models, but gray isn't as sexy as painted, my friend.
It's true. I own up to it. I've been called out more than once, and I'm gonna start. I hear you. So Sylvaneth are staying in the box, even though I've already built 2 of the Tree Lords. The new dwarf armies. Staying in the box. Even my son's army is pushed forward with more painting, but they're going to be put aside until I can get some more undead, actually, not just base coated, but actually painted. It may be a couple battle reports before people start seeing it, but that'll happen.
All right. Now, did you use the sword on one of your Tree Lords?
Did I? Yes, I did. Well, I used the sword because one of them is Durthu.
That's fine. I didn't need... Like, Durthu or not, that guy should have the sword. I don't carry the normal treatment. Don't carry the sword. They should all carry swords. because trees carrying swords is awesome.
No, I just kept the one sword so that he could be completely unique. But he is going to have a fiery, just a flaming sword.
Sweet.
Yep.
All right. I look forward to that, my friend. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I've got a pretty big Sylvaneth army, but again, I've got to get a couple more units of the undead first painted up before I go hit that one.
All right. Tom, what about you, bud? What are you dutifully working on even now?
Well, so I had been working on my Phoenix Guard unit. And then when the Armies on Parade got announced, I realized that if I want to do that in October, I need to get my Forest Goblins done. And so I jumped into a group that I wanted to convert. I don't know how well you can see these in the lighting, but I did. So I've converted my Forest Goblin or my Spider Riders to all have like the bony stuff, and I use all the spiky spider butts, like, because there's a bunch of different models for the spiders that come. So this unit is going to be my sub for my boar riders if I ever run a savage orc formation, because I'll have proxies for everything at that point. So I want to finish that one up first. So I have a 10 strong boar rider unit of like spiny spiders. It was originally going to be my Snagla Grobspit in his Death Creepers unit. But yeah, so I'm working on those. I'm hoping to get those done soon. I have a gigantic spider that I'm also working on that I've base coated and washed, and then hopefully I'll have all this done within a week, so then I can move on to the Ragnarok.
Are you doing any conversions for that?
For what? The Ragnarok?
Yeah. Are you gonna keep?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So the first one, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait on this. But yes, my first one's gonna be my general Ragnarok. Like traditionally, I used to run an 8th. I used to run like a Great Shaman on a Spider Shrine, like my general on there. Or he wasn't always a general, but you get the idea. And so on that one, the Howdo will be special. I'll say that. So I pulled some bits out of the Hobbit stuff, and it's gonna be fantastic.
There you go. So I finished up my prosecutors today. They actually just didn't get a chance to post them. My first 3 out of like 15. I don't know. There's too many. I have too many of those things. And so now, but I need to turn away from Sigmar for a little while. I've been working on these Sigmarites for too long. So now it's time for a little blood crusher action. So it's time to add a couple more figs to my female Khornite army. So all my blood crushers are gonna be traditional juggernauts, but they're all gonna be ridden by the vampiresses, the vampires from the Coven Throne that are like sitting like this on the steps of the Coven Throne. They actually will sit on the back of this guy pretty nicely, and like it looks like their hand is up on his head petting him and such. It actually fits rather well. Awesome. I'm very happy with how it came out. So working on those now. Yeah. Someday I'll finish that army. That is my eternal, I'm always working on it in the background army. Like when I get bored with whatever the main thing I'm working on is, Khorne girls come in and remind me of what's important in life, which is to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentation of everybody, basically. It's not just pretty much everybody. It's not just their women, it's just everybody. That's what's important. And to get blood for the blood god. So, with that, as always, we want to know what you're working on. We hope that we are entertaining you while you paint or hobby. We always hope the show is contributing to the number of painted models in the world. I want that on my tombstone when I die. Contributed to the number of painted models in the world. That is a great epitaph. If I can get that, I will be happy. But so put what you're working on down below. We always love to see it and hear it. Let's turn to our main topic, which is Mordheim. That's right, Mordheim. We're going to talk about a 15-year-old game that GW hasn't supported since 2000. I mean, I'll say 2 to be generous, because there was technically a Warhammer annual that came out that year that had some Mordheim content.
I think there was a 2003 annual, by the way.
I don't think that did it have anything in it though. Whatever.
For Mordheim,
let's say a long time, more than a decade. Is that fair? All right. And yet, I still love this game. Tom, I know you love this game. Mitch, You love this game, correct? You're a big
I'm,
Mordheim fan.
I'm still playing it. I'm playing it this Saturday.
Very nice. Yeah, there's still leagues all over the place. A lot of love for Mordheim out there. So, Mitch, why don't we do it this way? Tell me about what Mordheim is. Just sum it up. Give me a general description of what the game is.
Okay, there's a rock fell from Earth and polluted an entire town with, I guess, warpstone, and now all these factions, these groups, have converged on it to try and gather up whatever treasures and whatever this warpstone is. And essentially, the game, it's a skirmish game where your characters specifically, but also there's potential for the standard rank and file guys that you have after each game they could level up and gain new skills, or they could, if they die, they could degenerate and have bad things happen to them, like you lose an eye or lose an arm or get sold to the pits. And there's really interesting and funny and very humorous things that can happen. But the game is not about just the game that you're playing. It's a string of games connected that create a narrative. You never know really what game you're going to play. There's a whole series of scenarios with different objectives. So you're not just running at each other trying to kill each other. But the point of the game is to try to advance your warband, increase the wealth of your warband, purchase new members of your warband, and then of course crush your enemies throughout the course of the campaign. A lot of times when I see these campaigns, they have an endpoint, and your warband rating, which is some numerical calculation that takes into consideration how strong your warband is, how many characters you have, how much they've leveled up, how many guys in the warband, how many people you have in the warband. I think most of them max out at around 12 or 15. And then at the end of a limited amount of games, however many they are, you just see who's got the highest warband, and I guess that person could be proclaimed the winner, or not, or you just keep on going. But then the fun of it, of course, is starting over, because some of the beginning, sometimes the warbands can get very powerful after like 10 or 15 games, to the point where it's just better to just start over. But either way, it's just very cool to see the mishaps and misfortunes that would happen from game to game.
I think that was a fantastic description. Absolutely. And why did we decide to talk about it tonight? Well, as we've mentioned on previous shows, Tom and I are working on a Mordheim expansion pack for Age of Sigmar. The idea Age of Sigmar suits very well to the skirmish sort of game, much as Mordheim did. And the problem with AOS is it's a little bigger and it doesn't quite have the fine granularity of a few rules we would need in the city, nor necessarily the campaign elements. So we've started putting together just a rules pack meant to change as little as possible about Age of Sigmar, and bolt that on top for people who want to play Mordheim in the Age of Sigmar. And we're going to put that out here hopefully at the end of the month, although that's coming up very quickly, for the community to review and play test. We'll just have like an alpha version where this is not going to be done at the end of the month, to be very clear about that. This will be our initial playtest alpha version for people to take and play with and break and give us feedback and all sorts of that stuff. And we'll make it available to everyone and anyone who wants it and wants to give it a shot. But we thought before we did that, hey, let's do a show where we talk about Mordheim itself and what we loved about it and what we hated about it and how that's informing our design. So that was a great description, Mitch. I think you summed it up perfectly. Honestly, I don't think you really missed much of anything. It's pretty good. It's skirmish. It's ongoing. There's this narrative. You rise, you fall. Mordheim is in it to me, and we'll start this off. Let's talk about what's essential. What is that essential je ne sais quoi of Mordheim, right? Because it's a really good game and it really sticks in there. Like Blood Bowl and Necromunda, it's one of those specialist, smaller games that has really held a place in the gaming zeitgeist despite not being supported for so many years. And I think I'm not going to talk about the other two games, but let me just say, they share a lot of the same, what I would call essential ingredients. But Mitch, you get to start us off. What would you say what is one of the essential ingredients to Mordheim to you? One of those things that makes it stand apart, makes it so special?
I think that let's just talk about historically what you would put down on the table when you played a war game in general. You could play Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition Age of Sigmar with just a handful of pieces of terrain. I think what really makes Mordheim absolutely amazing is the amount and diversity of the terrain. And I think the most interesting games I played of Mordheim is when the table is just filled with multi-level buildings. You take a look at Long Island Wargaming, some of the videos he has on, and there's just some beautiful homemade terrain pieces. He's even taken some of the old cardboard terrain, and then he's obviously adapted it. You could take some of the old cardboard terrain, which is hard to find, by the way, and in some cases can be kind of expensive, even though it's just cardboard cutouts. But it's not hard to make from from foam board and cardboard and MDF. Some really nice buildings. But if you have a very busy table with lots of 2 or 3 story or even more buildings, ruined buildings, half destroyed, old world look, ladders, different levels, it just creates an incredible depth to the game and the amount of strategy with the rules. Some of the rules can sometimes be wonky, but I just think that an empty board or a sparse board with just maybe 6 or whatever pieces, I think you're missing what some of the incredible stuff that goes on with Mordheim when you just have an absolutely filled table.
I completely agree. Boy, is that true. You really, like, the best Mordheim boards are the most terrain, right? And just towers and broken buildings and rivers and graveyards and hanging trees and whatever. It's just on and on and on. All right, I love it. Definitely a good one. Tom, what's another one of your essential elements? We'll go around the horn twice because I think there's a lot.
Randomness. If you ever played Mordheim, you know that like things can turn on a dime. Like, and so this in combat, this is deadliness. You could have the biggest, beefiest, badass warrior, and man, a stray arrow can catch him in the neck and put him on the ground. And so like there's a lot of this unexpectedness. So this manifests in swinginess in the games, like in the actual like turn-to-turn play. Like things are really kind of up in the air. Like you never have it in the bag by strategy. Like the plans are perfect until the fight, the engagement happens. And once the engagement happens, really it could be anybody's game. Like there are no fights that are just dead set, like one way or the other. So that's in the game. And outside of the game, this also applies because you could have a really bad game and get like lose, a quarter of your troops, fail your morale check, and run off the board, which is, is fairly a big spanking. Like, you've just been spanked by, like, they picked off a couple of your dudes, you fail morale, and the game's over within 20 minutes of starting. Yet, like, you could walk away, and then you move into the exploration phase, you roll dice, you figure out what you find, you could drop some awesome thing and walk away with way more gold and way more loot and way more everything than the other player does. Likewise, if you had heroes go put out of action, there's randomness and swinginess in that. You get to injuries. Your hero that got put down by the Goblin Ravager or the Goblin Fanatic that came tearing into your lines could shake it off and walk away with no injuries. He could permanently have a leg removed and have a new peg leg that he limps around the battlefield from that point on for every game forward, or he could just be dead. Someone you've invested money and time and a multitude of other things deleted off of your sheet.
Yep.
All of that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. That actually leads into my essential element, which is suffering. Okay. Suffering is essential to Mordheim for both your warband and you as a player. You can't have the sweet without the sour, and Mordheim delivers both in spades. So you talked about that swinginess, but like I think this extends to all levels of Mordheim. It had this unbelievably sort of dark gallows humor tone to it, right? And I think that that's reflected in the fluff of the thing. It's reflected in the rules of how things played out. And the whole game was very dark. And, like, the people who are here in Mordheim, searching around this city to try to get loot, guess what? These aren't the best people of their respective nations, right? these are the bottom of the barrel. Because the people who are the best warriors and the best of the best, they're all fighting wars in the real Warhammer, sort of world. This is where, if you're at the bottom of the Warhammer world, if you're a gutter, person just living down, blessing the day when you find an apple core that you only have to fight 3 rats off to get to, and that's a great day, Mordheim is the city for you, right? These are people who have nothing and hence have nothing to lose. And so, yeah, you watch them get injured and maimed, and sometimes they struggle and rise above and become great and legendary and find amazing goods and equipment and such. And I love everything about that. Winning and earning stuff really matters in Mordheim because Mordheim is hard. It's a hard city, and it makes broken men. And when I say that, I mean both your warband and your players.
Yeah, and to add on to that, this goes back to the randomness. Because so much of that, being made into something great is because you rolled well a couple times.
Well, many times, not just a couple.
Many times, yes. Yes,
yeah. It doesn't turn on a few rolls.
It doesn't turn on 1 or 2 rolls. You've gotten lucky with that character a number of times. Now, for every one of those, there are 30 people that are broken or dead lying in the gutter.
Right.
Which is why, in a lot of cases, people will hold back their heroes not to take risk with them because of how dangerous and how quickly the game can turn around. It's unfortunate sometimes, but it makes sense. I mean, if you were that guy and if you were that character in Mordheim, honestly, I'd be sending the peons out first.
Well, let me instead of doing another round of essential elements, let's switch to a round of crowd nails because you just hit one of mine right there. So do you want to talk about that? Because Mordheim, as great of a game it was not without problems.
Yes.
So let's do a round of talking about what we saw as the flaws of the game. And are they essential, that is to say, yeah, that's just what you take with it, or could they be improved upon? So you're saying your heroes. You want to expound upon that idea?
Well, yeah. So there's if your character is knocked out, you'll have anywhere from a few to maybe as much as maybe 6 characters, and the rest are henchmen. And you also can hire, depending on how much gold you have, you can also hire mercenaries. But your characters are really the ones that level up. Your henchmen don't level up. So at the end of each game...
They do.
Oh, they can. They can. That requires a little more depth and a little explanation. They can. But most of the time, your henchmen aren't gaining the same level of advancement that your heroes do. Your heroes are advancing much quicker, and they get really dramatic abilities to step aside from attacks, whether they're missile weapons or close combat, or the ability to parry or to do improve their statistics. And your henchmen, while they can improve, have the chance in some cases to also become heroes if they get this special role called Lad's Got Talent. So what happens at the end of the game, which, by the way, if we were going to do another round, my biggest thing would be that the most fun, and maybe this is a detriment also, the most fun I have is actually sometimes at the end of the game when I'm rolling up what happened to...
We'll do another round, don't worry, we'll do another round of potential. So
I'll get to that. So I'll save that one. So the idea is that you let your characters, they advance especially if they knock other enemies out of action, and eventually they hit these milestones where then they can roll on a table, and they may gain stats, they may gain abilities, or if they die, they get knocked out of action. You have to roll on the mishap table to see what happens to them. One of my favorites of that is that you can get sold basically into captivity, where you have to buy your hero back from your opponent, or you may get stuck in the pits where you have to fight a pit fighter, which I think is also kind of funny. And a pit fighter's no joke. I'd love to be a pit fighter. So those types of things happen. Or you have disadvantages, like, for instance, you lose an arm, or you have a peg leg, and those have things like -1 to your movement permanently, or -1 to your hit rolls, or various other things.
Or so everybody's favorite, the sucking chest wound that was -1 toughness. Whoa, that was always a terrible one.
But you could get the sucking chest wound and you lose the toughness, but then you could gain a toughness back. So you could be that big burly guy with a toughness 6, but has a sucking chest wound.
Sure.
So you could, depending on how much you play and how many games you put in to advance these characters, they can evolve where they have just real depth in character. And I think that sometimes that can be a little bit of a disadvantage. But it seems that the end game, seeing what happens to your warband, is just as much fun. In some cases, more fun than the actual game itself.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you hit on that to me is one of the proud nails is that there's this thing I noticed. I've played a lot of Mordheim. I've taken multiple warbands over 500 rating. Okay, so like that should, for people who play Mordheim, you know how long 500 rating is. That's a lot of games.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about it. So one of the things that you were kind of hinting at was that your heroes are relevant to collecting your treasure and such. At the end of the way it worked was very simply, the more heroes you had, the more bites you had at the apple for rolling a treasure. The more heroes that didn't get put out of action, the more bites you had at rolling for treasure. So getting your heroes into fights, and melee combat was way more deadly than missile combat, right? Like way more deadly. And so getting your characters into bare-knuckle brawls was generally really dangerous and often stupid because you're going to lose a couple of them, which means if the other person committed henchmen and you committed heroes, even if you win, it's often a Pyrrhic victory, right? Yep. Because at the end of the game, you've got like 3 heroes, you're going to get jack all out of your loot table. They lost a bunch of henchmen, which may or may not die, who cares, but they're going to get a ton of rolls on the loot table and end out, could come out a lot better despite the fact they lost the game. So it gave this natural incentive that the warbands that could do the best were the warbands that didn't need to commit their heroes to win. Yep. Either their heroes were spellcasters who could stand at a distance, or worse, were ranged participants who could kill with a bow. Like, so it didn't matter that it was less deadly. If I can hold all 6 of my heroes back and just have them bow fire while I send out my henchmen to go melee fight, that warband is in a much better position. And the reality is lots of warbands didn't have that choice. You look at, like, the undead with the vampire and the 3 Igors and the necromancer, they had melee people. That was it. You marched forward. And God forbid you march into the Mordheim equivalent of a gun line.
Or into a situation where you're outmatched in hand-to-hand. I mean, the vampire can become obscene. He can become brutal. It's one of the most devastating fighters in the game. And you could easily get taken out with a series of mishaps in combat. And I know I took out one very leveled up in last season when they were doing it at one of the local shops, and I had my 2 dwarf slayers just destroy a vampire that was leveled up quite a bit. I mean, he easily the match of each of these 2 slayers, and these slayers just ripped into him. Just some good dice rolls, some good statistics. And there goes your and then you have to re-roll your warband, and at least in that case, not in all of them. Actually, no. I think I'm wrong. I think you can buy back your vampire.
You can buy back a vampire.
Yeah.
Well, and that leads me to my gripe, which is the death spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And these kind of all hit around the death spiral. Like, so there was a critical point where you would get in a warband where once you've lost a number of base troops and a number of heroes, like there's no real recovering back to where you were, because like maybe the hero you've lost maybe 1 or 2 actual heroes dead. You have some sucking chest wounds and just some incompetent heroes. Like you've lost an arm on one of your main fighters, or you've suffered a number of these like permanent wounds, coupled with you've had a bad run of a couple of games, and so you've lost a number of your henchmen, and there's just no making back your money. You're not able to buy back your henchmen in any meaningful way, and you're just going to continue to lose repeatedly, game after game after game, until the warband ceases to exist.
At that point, you just re-roll.
Yeah. But if you're in a long campaign, that's a frustrating proposal, because you're going to be staring down another number of armies. Now, that said, and this is one of my positives, I think, if we do another round, is that this game handled inequality in warbands better than almost any other game I've ever seen.
Yeah. My next proud nail would be I'll take my final proud nail, and that's just the rules were very inequitous, because in certain people's ability to properly utilize the terrain. Let me get in deeper on that. You mentioned the necessity of terrain, right? And I agree. Terrain was so important. The problem with that is that, do you remember how you like jumped and climbed things and all of that?
Yes.
It was an initiative check. Yeah. And so like Skaven warbands and Elvish warbands that are all like initiative 5 and 6 were just bulletproof. They could just move around the city like they're Wuxia ninjas, right? Like never failing, never falling. It was fine.
You don't want to be a dwarf trying to jump down into a trench.
Right, whereas certain warbands like dwarves and the lizardmen and such, when they came into the Lustria expansion, just literally couldn't climb. It's not like you couldn't risk doing it. It's just you could sit there for the game and roll at it and never make it. Yep. You know, I'm not talking about like falling off a cliff. Oh, well, you had to take a chance. That's what's called taking a chance. I get it. I like taking chances. I don't like standing at the bottom of a wall and just going for 5 rounds, right? And just like, oh, there's an objective up there. I need to win the game. I've got 7 troops standing around it. But we're all initiative 1, so can't get there.
Yeah,
it was impossible. Meanwhile, one elf runs in, he's just like boop, 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 boop.
Grappling hooks. Grappling hooks.
Even with rerolls from grappling hooks, rerolling on a 1 was still tough. But yes, of course, there was some equipment that could bounce out. But initially, it was a little too swingy of a stat, right? And it made it so you could have like the thing about the game was that it should have been fun to interact with the terrain. That was what it was all about. I want there to be a risk to fall. Hell yes. I want to see people fall on their heads and go splat, and then for somebody to come along and sweep their body into the fetid river that runs through the city. Yes, I want that. I just don't want that to happen either automatically to some troops or never to others, right?
Well, that's where I guess my next choice would be to play Mordheim. You need a sense of humor. Yeah. That and an extensive bits box, because the opportunities for customization are glorious, absolutely glorious in this game. The things you can do with unused bits and models that may not fit even with maybe you have that extra guy that you never used in your Warhammer Fantasy army. You could bring that in. But to get back to my original point, a sense of humor. Yes, there are some times where your warband is starting that death spiral, and obviously you want the game to be fun, and it might force you to reroll what really is a cool warband. It is not a forgiving game, but you need to have a sense of humor because the game is built around it is a brutal game, and it harkens back to the days when GW made games that were where the bad things happen much more than I think the good. The charts are not friendly,
or at least an equal amount at best. Best. Yeah. So let's go back into another round of essential elements. So you mentioned that, but I'll give you another bite at the apple. Give me another essential element of Mordheim. The best things.
The best things. Well, I think one of the things that makes it easy to play the game is that you don't need a lot. Some of the really rare and desired warbands, especially the old ones, they've been out of print for forever. It's hard to find them sometimes, and even if you do find them, they could be kind of expensive. But you could mash up a bunch of guys that use some excess models. You don't need more than maybe 12 or 15 models. And I think that the barrier of entry, as far as that's concerned, is really kind of easy. The rules are free. You can grab them you can grab them online. They're fairly easy to read and learn, but you don't need 300 models or 100 models. You need 15 guys, or maybe 20 if you want to have some different. Maybe this guy has a weapon and shield. Maybe this guy has a crossbow. Maybe this guy has 2 swords, or this guy has an axe and a sword. If you want to play WYSIWYG, you might make a couple extra guys, but you don't need a massive army. And therefore, you don't have to transport a massive army. You can bring it in a little shoebox or something smaller. I think that was one of the nice things. You can go and play a series of games with just this small collection of models and have an incredible time for an afternoon or an evening.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. The barrier of entry is so low. Quick funny story talking about those hard-to-find warbands. A year ago, so not that long, right? A year ago, I happened to wander into a game store that I'd never been in before in my town. I happened to hear about this weird, out-of-the-way game store. I wandered into it, and they had an Amazon Mordheim Warband shelf, or Mordheim Warband on the shelf, which I immediately bought because it was only like $40. Like it was still basically original retail price. That is the hardest to find warband, short of like the Sisters of Sigmar. And that Amazon warband is amazing. So that's my greatest get ever. There you go. All right, Tom, your essential element.
I would just, as I mentioned, inequality. This game handles inequality fairly well, from bonus experience between the forces to the fact that the great leveling factor in the game is the scenarios. If you have the right tools, if you have the right placement, if you make a good roll, a game could be over before it starts, even if you are clearly outmatched in combat. And when I say it could be over before it starts, in your favor, even though you're clearly outmatched in combat. And so there is a sense, there is always a chance to win a match, no matter how bad of a force you're fielding. And so, despite my critique of the Death Spiral, which is a very real thing, there was also a very large kind of latitude in what the game could handle appropriately between forces. And I think that's such a valuable thing.
Yeah. Absolutely agreed. You really could, if you're using that bonus experience and you do get into Death Spiral and roll a new person, if you play a little conservatively for a game or two using that bonus experience table, you can catch up. Yep. And be ready to go. Yeah. So my essential element, you mentioned scenarios, and certainly that should not be discounted. That the scenarios are the most important essential element, right? Like that's the game without scenarios doesn't work. The game with scenarios, amazing. I mean, that is the bottom line. But that actually isn't the one, but we have kind of already mentioned that. My essential element, I think I'd like to use to segue into what I want to do in the next round, which is, my essential element is the variants of the warbands. So I've mentioned and rifled through a bunch of them. They ended up making a couple expansions. They made a Lustria expansion and all this kind of stuff where they introduced these new warbands. And that was like, the jungle warband. So it started all in the city of Mordheim, but then eventually it went, other places. We went to the jungles of Lustria and so on and so forth. And then we even went out into the wilderness of the city around Mordheim as the confrontation expanded. But just the sheer amount of warbands that were official and then unofficial, that is to say GW made it but never called it official. And then when you expand out to like the fan-made experimental warbands, a lot of which got very good amounts of feedback and critiques from the community and are fairly well balanced in design, there's just a huge number of warbands out there, and I love it because again, that barrier of entry is so low. Like you mentioned, Mitch, you can start a new warband, and if you're a fairly quick painter, in a couple weeks you can have a new force on the table. There you go.
Even somebody who paints like I do.
There you go. So let's segue that into our next round, which is the best warbands. So, the best warbands. You can do this however you want. No more than 3. No less than 1. Best warbands. Mitch, go. And how am I defining best? We define best like we always define best on this show. We don't. You tell me why it's the best. Go.
Oh, God. All right. You should do this for the War Games episode. I'm not fully prepped, but I think when it comes to some of the disadvantages of Mordheim is that some of the warbands are just not created equal. I mean, some of them are really just much better, especially some of the unofficial ones. I'm not talking about the fan ones. I think the Elven warbands specifically, like the Wood Elf one, is just brutal. It's absolutely brutal. It's just very forgiving. It's devastating. They're so fast. And shooting can be crazy in this game, which is why just to go back to my previous point of having very diverse terrain and many buildings and many different things that can help block line of sight, it helps kind of some of the slower moving warbands or the warbands that are much more hand-to-hand oriented to be able to go and kind of run from building to building to kind of close the gap. But that Wood Elf one is devastating. Now, a lot of people have different feelings about this next one, but there's one element to the Carnival of Chaos that absolutely just makes it incredible, and that is the chariot. The what is it called again? You can buy this chariot that basically cannot be destroyed unless you house rule it, because it's using old edition Warhammer Fantasy type rules. And as a result, there's nothing really in the game that can get a high enough strength to damage it.
Right.
So essentially, you can, unless you have the only way that I was able to defeat this was in a game with my Dwarven Treasure Hunters last season where I kind of shot it and it went out of control and then it fell into a ditch and it didn't die. It just could not move out of this ditch because we had this great board that had a canal that ran through the center of it, and it got stuck there. And because it got stuck there, that's a huge part of one of my opponent's army, and he had a really nice conversion for it. But ultimately, that thing is it's indestructible. So it made the Carnival very devastating. So I think that was one of them. I think that if built right, a Dwarven army could be brutal too. And one of the reasons why is because you've got long range, you've got really good toughness. Starting out, dwarves can be terribly powerful because they're so hard to hurt. Having a 4 toughness is incredible, and it's unprecedented in across many of the warbands. And the strength versus toughness in the early stage of the game, it's very easy to get knocked out. Even if you have lots of shooting, eventually you're going to score some hits. So that wounding roll is big, and you don't have lots of armor early on if you're playing your warband right. You're probably waiting and collecting getting a proper warband and then getting better stuff after a couple of games. So you probably don't have a lot of defenses, and if you don't have a high toughness, every shot that hits is a good chance to knock you out of the fight. Dwarves starting off with that 4 toughness are incredible, and while they are not fast, if you play I went up against the norm with this. Everybody told me play a gunline type, Dwarven Hunter Warband, and I went the other way. I had a couple of the guys to snipe, but most of my guys, my 2 Slayers and everything else, were meant to just get into hand-to-hand. I wanted to go against the grain. But you could play a gunline type Dwarven army, and it would be very frustrating for an opponent. It's not going to be great if the scenarios are the things that equalize that. But those are the 3 that I would pick, and they might be a little bit situational too.
My greatest enemy in my first round of Mordheim, played way back in 99 or 2000, 99, was my friend who had the Cash Money All-Stars. That was the name of his dwarves, because the Dwarven Treasure Hunters always got the extra one, so he had them all done up with gold rings, and they were all named after late 90s rappers. So the Cash Money All-Stars were a hard warband to stop, indeed. All right, Tommy, what's your best warbands?
I'm just going to go with, there's a lot of really good stuff. Like right out of the main book, like the Skaven are just rocking it. But I would say on the wider perspective, I'm partial to the Elven warbands. Not only because I'm an elf player, but just because they're good. They're really good. The forest elves, man, let me tell you, they are banging on all cylinders. Because their heroes can all be ranged heroes, and they have the nice, the good infantry henchmen to throw in front to engage in skirmish. I would say that, but more even than them, I would say properly built. I think the scariest warband to me are the Dark Elves. Whether you're playing the Druchii or the actual base Dark Elves, because you could get to toughness 4. You could get to toughness 4 elves, that's a thing. And with all the other defensive stuff that they're running around with the Sea Dragon Cloak and all the sidestep abilities and all that stuff, you can really set up a really solid warband. They have repeater crossbows right out of the gate, so they're shooting off 2 shots. The key to Mordheim is Mortax. And then in the Druchii warband, assuming you're running that, you're running around with Witch Elves. And one of the abilities you can upgrade is Infiltrator. So some of the strongest things for Skaven and being able to place elsewhere on the board, your Dark Elf heroes can be doing that. So I really think literally Dark Elves, and they have a sorceress, so they actually have magic. Some of the warbands didn't have magic, so they had magic on top of all of that. Again, truly, I think that, and some of their spells were really, Doombolt, were really good and really devastating. And so, again, banging on all cylinders. Flight, fantastically useful spell, especially when you go pick up an object and fly away. Man, that pisses people off. So, yeah.
All right. I like it. It's a good list. All right, for me, I'll do it like this. One, I'm going to pick the same thing you did, but it's true. Skaven, they were the best warband in the base book. They were my original warband, not because I'm a cheaty face, but because I already, as we all know, I played Skaven, so I had to figs. That's what it was. I was poor, I didn't have a lot of money, but I did have an army of Skaven already, so that problem solved itself. the next warband I will mention is perhaps a bit of an unusual one, but there were two that I particularly liked, and both came out of the experimental warbands, which were some like they were published in sort of other sources, or I guess one might be like unofficial, whatever, I don't know, doesn't matter. So there was a merchant caravan one that came out of one of like the annuals, the fire in the wilderness around. Loved them because they played a totally different game. They were all about money after the game. They could go on like extra little rolls, and like if you just played, they were playing a totally separate game. Like they were there to engage you and get in a fight with you, but their real mini game happened afterward. They were the total expansion of what you were talking about, Mitch.
You're talking about the merchants?
The merchants, yeah, because just like they were playing this whole other weird game about making money and staking and gambling and doing this stuff, and you had this big wagon full of gear you could sell to other players and buy on the cheap and resell on the high. It was nuts. Okay, they were like the Merriam-Burgers set to 11.
I need 5 minutes just to tuck my son in. I'll be right back.
Okay, that's fine. We'll keep going here. So I thought they were absolutely hilarious. I loved. I just there was something about that warband that was totally awesome, because the fact that you were playing, you really took that idea that there was this second game going on, right, in the monetary and the rolling aspect in that kind of thing, and brought it well into the fore, which I thought was cool. The other one that I would call out, even though it's a terrible warband, like I'm going to call it the best, because it had some of the best models and some of the best special equipment. And that was what I mentioned earlier, the Amazons. They'd be my third pick. As a warband, they're just a bunch of normal humans that are fairly unimpressive. So best in that regards, no. But they were absolutely stunningly well done models for the time. All metal, sadly, but that's okay. If they could be, if I could get a whole army of those in plastics now, oh, what I wouldn't do. But they were fantastic, and what was great about them was, so at this time, I don't know if this is still the case because they haven't mentioned Amazons in a long time recently, and if they mention them at all, I don't know. Maybe somebody out there will know. But you could get laser guns and power claws, or, you know, that kind of thing. So in the story, the Amazons are like this weird race that actually has technology of the old ones, which were always thought to be 40K people, and this lent credence to it because they have these things called like the claw of the sun and the staff of the sun, because they fire these bright bolts of light which shear through armor and reduce men to ash. Yeah, those are called power claws and laser rifles and laser pistols. Unless you think I am just filling in the blank with my own imagination off of the description, the Amazon Warband box set comes with Amazon chicks, like chicks wearing feather outfits and skulls, holding laser pistols, like holding like Eldar laser pistols, and similar types of laser guns and things like that. And of course, I had to remodel all mine to be wielding power claws, like 40K power claws, because that made me laugh. They were very hard to get because there was not a lot of these things running around, but that just made me laugh so much that these lunatic primitive savages are running in with laser guns. Was always one of my favorite things.
Sure, why not?
Absolutely.
So, as we kind of transition and wrap things up, do you think that we should kind of talk about the design direction?
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to spend some time here at the end talking about, you know, what are we hoping to get out of our Mordheim bolt-on expansion. So what are our design goals? So do you want to start, or would you like me to start?
No, you can start.
Okay. So for me, the design goals of why are we doing this, right? Welcome back, Mitch.
Hey
we kind of finished off, and we're gonna do the last section here, talking about what are our design goals with our new Mordheim bolt-on. Okay.
All right.
And so my design goals, like certainly the chief thing in my mind, was first to preserve the essential elements of Mordheim. Okay. So all the things you've heard us talk about, the importance of terrain, the varied number of warbands, the importance of scenarios, the brutal tone, the ability to lose and suffer but also win big, the randomness, all of these things that I consider the essential elements to preserve the Mordheim experience.
Yep.
And bring that into AOS. That's number one. I think number two, right below that, is to preserve the Age of Sigmar experience, right? And by that, I mean keep it simple, right? Use the rules, like on the complexity emerges from the game, from the interaction of these units and their special abilities and the terrain and the scenario objectives and all this stuff. Complexity just happens. You don't need to work to make a game complex. That will just happen, I promise you. And so our goal is to keep it simple, stupid, right? The old KISS principle. And so to change as little as possible from the War Scrolls, because I don't want to rewrite, 700 War Scrolls or whatever they made. No, that is not great. So as much as we can possibly lift from those War Scrolls and just, say, in fact, not even just lift, say, refer to that War Scroll, right? That's your thing. And just use that thing. What other sort of design goals do you have, Tom?
What I would say is that I think the contours of Mordheim are all going to be there. You will have heroes and henchmen. I don't know if we're going to call them henchmen, but I mean, obviously the keyword of hero is already there. So you will have warbands full of heroes and henchmen. You will have a wide diversity of warbands. You will have deadly combat. Even for things that are running around with way more wounds than we normally would expect, you will have deadly combat. You will have so with that, like the swinginess of combat. There will be advancement. There will be mortal grievous wounds and insanity and psychosis. There will be
blood. There will be blood.
We're waiting for that.
There it is. Well, I think the important part is that I drink your milkshake. Okay, I think that's what's relevant. Yeah, no, I think all that's right, Tom. And I'm very excited about it because it's a game I had a lot of fun with, and it's something that I want to bring forward and hopefully let some other people experience it, maybe while they're still playing their game. Obviously, one of the big challenges of Mordheim is even when playing it recently, it's using these old sort of proto-sixth ed rules, right? And it can be a bit clunky at times with some of the rules interactions and stuff like that. The old, like, you can't pre-measure anything and, all that sort of stuff, right? You had to just guess your charge range and things like that. And so I think those are the elements. We're looking to, stick with the Age of Sigmar mechanics so you already know how to play the game as much as possible. Not always going to be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, what I would say with that is, another design goal, at least for me, was there's a lot of people that have written off Age of Sigmar at this point. Like, that they just, looked at it, said, no, this isn't for me. And I'm hoping that something like this will give people pause to take a second look. If not in the main core game, in the big game, at least in some variant of Age of Sigmar, which is what we're basically spinning off. In that, and it doesn't take a lot to buy a couple models and put a warband together. You can do it likely with most of your collection, and you can the multitude of warbands that can probably be fielded from your collection is legion. I mean, I don't think that we did any less than 2 warbands from every army, and I know some armies that have at least 4 warbands that were created for them.
And the basic rule mechanics for Age of Sigmar just scream skirmish game. There's just not that much that I think that you would need to do to adjust it beyond scenarios and stuff. I mean, I know you guys are doing, it's a Herculean effort, to make any kind of game, but then take a game, 2 games basically, and merge into one is no small feat. So I'm not trying to diminish that, but there's a lot already built into Age of Sigmar that makes this process it's just amazing. I'd be surprised if if GW doesn't release something, but if they don't, it's nice to know that you guys are there.
We're here for you, absolutely. So, Mitch, let me ask you a question. If there was one thing you wanted to see from what we do here, what would it be? What do you want? What does our thing? What would you want us to have for sure? Could be anything. You can be as specific or general as you like.
I know that you're looking to preserve a lot of the feel of the game, and I think that's one of the things that's helped Mordheim last so long after GW's let it go. There's just a vibrant community. I kind of left it and came back to it. And I have a friend who was the guy who got me into Warhammer in general, introduced me to GW games with things like Necromunda and I mean just. And Mordheim and Gorka Morka, and you could go down the list, and then of course 40K and fantasy, and he's still playing that game. And I actually told him about this, and he's interested in Age of Sigmar. He hasn't gotten into it yet, but he has a lot of his old armies. And when I told him that there was a group of people that I know that are looking to convert Age of Sigmar into Mordheim, he was beside himself. He was very happy. He was very interested. I think the thing that I would most want to see is that the tables at the very end of the game still have the level of interest and the level of complexity, the level of randomness, the benefits and the disadvantages. If I could, I think that this might be a controversial one for anybody who's a real Mordheim aficionado, but I noticed something with Ant when he was playing in this campaign for Malifaux, that there's a way with some of these mishaps that you can kind of take a chance. You could pull an ace or something out and kind of avoid it in some way. In order to kind of help prevent that death spiral of a warband, which you got to be, you've had to just, it was part and parcel with Mordheim to deal with that. That could happen. It could eventually happen that your warband is just going to diminish, and it added some complexity and some real risk to the game. But I'd like to see some way of finding a way around losing your warband, because after a whole long campaign and a lot of converting and really getting attached to your characters, it's one thing to lose a character. It's one thing to even replace that character and eventually, over the course of the campaign, lose all of those characters and have new ones take their place. That's pretty cool too. But to have your warband completely be ineffectual is kind of unfortunate sometimes, especially when you gain attached. So I like to see in those tables some way to kind of get around that. But it can't be easy. It's going to have to be play tested, but still maintain that real fear of having to roll on that table.
All right, I like it. We're certainly going to deliver for you on those tables. I promise. That is already in the works, my friend. I promise you. If you liked what was there before, you will like what's there now. That's as much as I'll say about it. I don't want to spoil anything. Just we are expounding upon the idea without trying to. We're not just going crazy, but in logical ways. So there you go. All right. Well, with that, I think we've come to the end of our time. If you're interested in this, God bless you, and that's awesome. I'm excited. We're certainly excited for it. And like I said, look in the next week to two for us to put this up for people to play test with. This will be an alpha. It will be not organized, not in pretty book format, not edited properly and all that sort of thing. So please put up with that while we engage you all, because what we're really curious about isn't how good our spelling is. It's how good the things work and don't work. That's what we're looking for at that stage. So we'll look forward to a lot of feedback there. Mitch, any final thoughts before we close out?
I just can't wait to play test this. I mean, I have several groups that I know locally that play, and one group at one of the local shops has probably about 15 players that right now we're playing all of the expanded warbands to see what's broken, so that when we get back to the official league, they may introduce some additional ones, because they're kind of like, they stick to the core ones for their regular league, which is a very small buy-in and a little prize at the end for the highest warband. I think the top 2 or 3 places. I'm looking forward to play testing it, so I can't wait.
All right, awesome. Tom, any final thoughts? Besides dead air?
There will be dragons.
Okay, there you go. There will be dragons.
Really?
Oh, that's a fair one. All right. I don't think I'm going to be able to top that. So I will simply say, as always, Thank you much, and see you next Wednesday.